Hello everyone. Welcome to day 5 of getting started with cybersecurity. And before going to day 5, we'll just do a recap of what we did on yesterday. Just do a basic recap of yesterday's class. I'm audible, right? Am I audible? Is my screen visible? Okay, yeah, fine. Thanks. Okay, so we'll just go through a recap. So we did go through HTTP, a little bit about web request response and MIME. We did a little bit of examples uh, pertaining to URI syntax, HTTP request and response. And then we looked at HTTP header. We did a curl hands-on. Then we proceeded with Wireshark. We did look at how to capture traffic, how to analyze a packet. And we did discuss these three core terms of web terminologies. Yeah, so we actually didn't do browser development tools yesterday, so I'll be covering that today. So we'll look into how Chrome's web development tools are really important. Not just Chrome, but any other browser also. Then we took a look at just the top 10 OWASP vulnerabilities. I guess that is where we wounded up yesterday. So let's get started with today's presentation. Before presenting, if anyone has doubt about, so I wanted to ask if you have doubt about the RSA question that you have on the Slack, and if you're stuck somewhere, do DM me. I'll be happy to help you guys. Okay, so we'll start with day 5 today. Or I guess we'll wait for a few minutes for people to get in. If you guys have doubt, do ask me now. How many of you were able to solve the RSA question? Were you able to get the final plain text? So the plain text is in English, as in it is a meaningful English sentence. We will be starting the presentation in like 3 minutes or so, and 2 minutes. Yeah, okay. So people have solved it, right? Any other doubts pertaining to our previous classes? So I'm trying to discuss as in, are you comfortable with assembly level languages so that tomorrow for our class, I was thinking of doing buffer overflow. And for that, you guys will need to know a little bit of assembly language. So I'll have a poll today on Slack as to how to proceed forward on tomorrow's class. Okay, so whether to go on doing the application security with buffer overflow and stuff, or else we can go with something very basic than that. Okay, so we'll get started with today's lecture. Okay, so we'll start with today's lecture. We'll start with form submission. We'll look into the client side informations, the hidden form fields, exploiting the vulnerabilities, and referrer header. Now, what is client side information? So, anything that you have on your local machine or gets displayed on your local machine is a client side information. Even though the information might have come from the server to your machine, once it is on your machine, it becomes a client side information. Okay. And the values or data that you're trying to send to the server, just before it leaves, it's still the client side information. Okay. Now, there is nothing you can prevent from tampering with client side information. The only way, the only thing here important is that how does the server respond to your tampering? Now, if you're tampered your client side information and the server hasn't checked it or it hasn't parsed the input in a correct way, then there is a problem. But if the server has sanitized your input and dealt with it accordingly, then there is no problem with it. So only when the server code allows your tampering, there is a vulnerability in the system. Okay, now we'll see what are hidden form fields. Now, most of you might have known what a form is in HTML, right? Now, there are hidden fields which are generally present in HTML source codes. Now, these can be used in both ways, as in sometimes it is used for like CSRF protection, some captchas, etc. But there are places where you can convert this and exploit it. Now, let's see how that might look. Okay. Now, say full screen, full screen. Okay. Now, say you have a website which says, okay, let me phrase it this way. Assume you are in your banking system. You logged in not banking system, a shopping system. Okay. So you logged in into Flipkart. Now you're trying to purchase laptop monitor. And at the checkout, you have this form. You know, you're actually not sure if it is a form or not. But if you see its source code, okay, now before going through the source code, let's see what all are there. Okay. So you have one laptop which has some price on it, a monitor which has a price on it, a total price of say 2,500, and the credit card or the debit card details that you have. Now, basically, what they do is they have purchase, right? Like they press purchase, but since this is not a PHP file, I just written it to show you as a demo. So this will currently give you an error. Okay, so don't mind that. But still, say you clicked it. Now, once you click it, it will go to purchase, and your amount will get deducted, and so on. Now let's try to check what is the source code of this file. As we can see here, these details are something that was displayed to us and was visible to us. Whereas you can see in the form section, there are multiple inputs, right? But we were only able to see this input since it is visible and the rest of the input types are hidden. But the thing is, does these hidden values have any impact on the way your server processes the data, as in the client side information? Now, basically, when the server, I mean, when you're trying to click the button purchase, all this data is currently on your server side information. Now, the thing is, if you tamper with this and the server allows the code to go through as it is, then there is a vulnerability, or else it is not a vulnerability. Now let's see how you can tamper with this. Okay. So so this is what we just saw. Now how to go about it? So generally what you can do is, as we've seen here, you have the purchase button and you have your current total price as 2,500. Now there are some hidden fields called OID, price, and current, which we don't know. But if we try to understand it, so you can see that current might mean that, so cur might mean it is a currency, and that the value of cur here is USD. The price here is 2,500, which means it might reflect the total price that you have to pay. The OID might mean an object ID, and the value of object ID would be this. But these are just the assumptions. Okay. Now, what an attacker might do, or how an attacker might think, is what if I change the value of OID? What if I change the value of price? What if I change the value of US currency and then try to purchase it? Okay. Now, say, okay, so I'll explain you this syntax. So, the syntax, as we have seen, curl is the tool that we use to do HTTP request. It can be either GET request or POST request, depending on the way the form is implemented. Now, as we've seen previously, that assume this is, say this thing is, say, flipkart.com, and you're currently at purchase.php. Now, when you press purchase.php, some request goes from this page to some other page, right? Now, as you can see here, it will go to purchase.php with some post values, and the value should be all these things, right? So what curl does is there is by a switch I mean this input tag dash f means a value of a form, as in an input of a form. So you say curl, you say there is an input of a form. The input name is OID and the value, the price, the value, the currency, USD, and so on. Now, if you try to directly pass this through curl, there are multiple ways that can go wrong. The first thing is the server might say, I don't know who you are, go away. What that means is the server really doesn't know where you have come from. As in, it knows that you have to submit the form from purchase.php, but it doesn't know the person which referred you. Okay. And that is where you're not sending the cookies. It might be an issue and it might not be. Also, the referrer might be an issue or it might not be. So let's see how we can send the cookies. Okay. Now, until here, from here to here, we know. So all these stuffs, we know what this is, as we have just discussed. We'll later on discuss how to get a session ID, a cookie values. So we can send a cookie value, the name of the cookie value, and the value of the cookie. Now this you might be able to exploit this vulnerability using this code. Okay. So that is one example. Say you have another, so we'll discuss another example. Now say there is a PHP code. Okay. I hope you guys are a little bit familiar with PHP. If not, it is similar to other programming languages. Now say there's a code saying if what this thing means is if your method that you submitted is through get and the key value pair, as in the name of the input and the value of the input, is represented this way. So if the name of the input is password and the value you get of that input tag is through $_get of password. Now, if this is true, if this is this thing, if the password is this, only then make the admin as true, is what the implementation is what the developer wanted it to be. Now, if the admin is true, so some admin stuff. But what exactly can go wrong here? Okay. Now, it might be possible that these passwords, since this is a GET request, as you can see, now you can manipulate the values on the URL, right? So one way to exploit this vulnerability is just provide, say, you give GET request of all this with the password and you provide the admin as true. Now, since the admin is true, it won't actually, so when this is executed, the admin won't currently be true because it won't get through this if condition. But since the admin is 1, this might become 1, right? And then you can somehow get secret shell. I'm not showing this is the actual exploitation code for this pseudocode, but it might be. Now, what is referrer header? Okay. Referrer header is if you want to visit facebook.com, not facebook.com. Say you want to visit some banking site, and when you visit the banking site, there is a cookie value or a referrer, URI referrer, which says from where did you come to this location, so that the banking system knows how to backtrack the link. Okay. Now we'll see the examples while we do the hands-on. So any doubt until now? Oh, is my voice not clear today? Sure. I'll try switching on and off my voice. Hello, is my voice clear now? Not sure. Yeah. If you guys have any doubt, do let me know here. Any doubt, guys? No. Okay. So we'll move forward with authentications and like attacks on authentication, authorizations, etc. So what are authentication attacks? Yeah. So attacks so authentication is basically when you pass on your credentials to a system, as in a login system, you're getting authenticated. Okay. It means your identification is being verified by the system and you're being let into the system. Now, generally, form-based authentication system are something like your username and passwords, your login credentials, etc. Now, if you can carefully craft the packets and the exploitation, you can actually bypass the authentications. So now we'll see how exactly we go through the authentication attacks. Okay. Now there are several ways. As you can see here, weak password recovery procedures allow you to reset a victim's password directly. Okay. So you just go and say, forgot the password, and you see if there are some things that you can gain through that help of reverse engineering. Okay. When they say reset a password, you know the victim's email ID. Now the questions that they might ask might be very much easy to guess, or you could have knowledge beforehand you can use to exploit the system. Now, there are other ways such as session fixation, which you might be able to make the user into following a session. Now, say this is a link. You're sending it to your friend, and once they click this link, they'll be redirected to this page, right? So http://foo.com vulnerable.php. Now, since you have yourself fixed the value of session ID, now the person who is using that link currently, his session ID will be 1234. And now that you know his session ID because you were the one who fixed it. So that is the place where you are now compromising the system. You're not compromising the system, you're actually compromising the person who used this link. So the victim there was the person, not the system. And since there was a vulnerability in the system, you were able to exploit it. Now, then we come to something called as authorization attacks. Now, authorization is the part where you are authorized, like you have been given permission to do certain stuffs, and certain stuffs are not in your scope. So, if you do, if you are able to do stuffs that is not within your limits, then basically you are performing authorization attacks. Okay. Now, the first one is directory traversal attack. Since I didn't actually code this, I'm just showing it here. But directory traversal attacks can also be done in application security, and I'll be showing the directory traversal attack tomorrow while we do the application security stuff. So now say there is some system or a file called show.php. If you provide a file name to it, it will actually display the content of the file. Now, if the input that the user provide is not sanitized, what the user can do is he can traverse the directory. Okay. Now, this is a basic traversal code. Okay. As you do change directory and then traverse back or forward, this is the same way you do it here. Now, since this show.php was meant to display the contents of the file, it might display etc/password. It might, because there might be a possibility that this file is not, like this file does not have the permission to read or write into this file. And that might be the case that you might be able to see the contents or might not be able to see the contents. Now, what some people might do is they might restrict you from entering the slash, the dots, etc. Now you can go about this also by encoding it with the % symbols. So the dot basically is %2e and the slash is %2f. So if you give this, it will still work because you are encoding, you are making an URL encoding of your input. Now there is something called as automatic directory listing abuse. Now automatic directory listing abuse is when you open a project and you want to see a web page. Say you want google.com. Now the google.com say has index.html in its folder. Now when you open google.com as a folder, it will directly provide you with the web page that is there in the index.html. But if there is no index.html in that directory, you will be provided with all the possible link and all the files which are present in that directory. Now what we have done is somehow there is a system that allows you to see what all files are there in the directory. So you're actually abusing the directory. Now the other part might be robot.txt. So some people might know what robots.txt is. So robot.txt is a file which you provide to your website so that the crawler, as in Say Google wants to crawl your site. Now you can tell the crawler as to which all links of your website can it visit and it shouldn't visit. So you can provide all this information there. Now, say the organization of a org- organization doesn't want to let you see the WordPress login page. So what they might do is they might put a restriction for the crawler on robots.txt. And if we go and check to see if there is something that we can exploit, we might be able to see the public login page for that particular system in robots.txt. Okay. Okay. Now there is something called as indirect reference to the object. Now say you have a medical record, say you are the user ID 12229 and you are accessing your medical records. And while accessing, you see that this is a GET request and this is your URL, what you're typing. Now, since this GET request is based purely on the user's input, what if you try to mess with the user ID? Okay. So if it is a GET request, you'll simply be able to extract the information for the user ID 1230. So this was also one of the uh, vulnerabilities that we discussed in OWASP top 10. Okay. Okay. The next is injection attacks. So injection attacks is very common for like a decade or so. So what happens is the system expects data as input in its input form. If the user provides a command instead of data, there should be some mechanism for the system to say it is command, not a data, and differentiate it. But if it is not able to differentiate it, that is where the vulnerability lies. Okay. So you'll be able to see how worse it gets. Okay. Now let's say, okay. Now there are injection attacks, which is say you have OS injection attacks. So we'll be discussing it tomorrow. So some injection level, sorry, OS level functions that are vulnerable to these kind of attacks are system, eval, open, include, require, etc. We'll check this tomorrow. Okay, so before moving forward with injection attacks, particularly SQL and XSS, uh, do you have any doubts, guys? If you do have any doubt, do ask now. Okay, so we could include the if admin pseudocode in the previous block or if git pass right. This will help us overcome the vulnerability. No, what I meant to say there was, okay, we'll go through that. Okay, so this particular slide. What you're saying is if we put this section of code before this, we'll be able to counter the vulnerability. It might, but what I'm trying to say is the system should actually sanitize the inputs that it receives from the user. So it shouldn't blindly trust the inputs that the user provides, right? So there are variables that might get affected by the user's input, which the system didn't think earlier, was what I meant to say. But if this is on top of this, the actual admin will also not be able to say his stuff right. Because how will this $admin be true if this code isn't executed? Right? I guess you get that. Oh, not before inside the if get pass. Yes. Yeah, that might be true. Yeah, if you put this block inside this, it might be true. Yeah, so let's move forward. Okay, so any doubts before we proceed with injection attacks? Okay, I guess there are no doubts and we'll get started. Yeah. So the two most famous injection attacks are SQL attacks and XSS attacks. Uh, OS command injection is also common, but let's not go to OS injection command since it is application security kind of related stuff. Okay. Now, say you have a form, okay? So basically here the red colored stuff means there might be some issue with it, or it is really important to see what we are looking at. Okay? In this slide, this submit button is really important because you'll see why is it important. Now this is a form which uses post as a method, and it sends the values of this form to the login.php once the submit is pressed. Okay. The form contains two inputs, two other inputs except the submit button. Those are username and password. So I'm trying to set up a context here and we'll get started a few minutes after this. So this is a form. Next, say this is a login script. Okay. Login script say your post method, the name from this is getting stored in this. Okay. So to avoid confusion, let's make it username. To avoid confusion, let's make it username. Sorry. So to avoid confusion, since we made it username, okay, ignore the mistakes here. Okay, we'll just go with what I intended to say. Okay, so the username value is stored in the name. The password value, the MD5 of password value is stored in password. And a basic SQL query is written saying select everything from some table where the username is this and the password is this. So if a username is and passwords both match to something, it will get displayed into, as in it will get stored into SQL. Okay. And say this is a database. Okay. Say a database of users with ID, username, password, and to say if the admin is, if they are the admin or not. The thing is, once you submit, I'll just recap. Once you submit this form, it goes to login.php with a post method. Now the post method, you come to you come to login.php. There is a script here that evaluates your input and gets all the suitable information from the database. So from this database. Sorry. Now, how do you actually proceed with SQL injection? So providing command instead of data to a web application that is expecting data can leak data from the database. Now say the web application asks you, what do you want to shop? Now instead of inserting data in it, say it asks, what do you want to search for? Now say instead of asking for clothes, electronics, etc., you provide a command to it saying delete all the data. This actually will not work. This is just a pseudocode. Say you provide a command instead of data to the question that expects data. If it sanitizes this input and if it understands that this is command, not a data, it might just block you there, or it might just not process the request. But if it processes the request, you have successfully done an SQL injection. So one of the most famous techniques is this technique. It is generally referred as 1 equals to 1. So what this does is, okay, we'll look into what exactly it does. Now say there is an SQL query string saying select everything from some table, SA table, where username is name and password is some variable password. Okay, so these two are PHP variables, and this whole thing is an SQL query. Okay, now what could actually go wrong here? Okay, now since we have seen that this is an SQL query, now I represented this whole actual SQL query with red and the input as blue. Now if you enter this as the username or and password also, so what happens is the actual command that gets sent to the server, if it isn't sanitized, is select star from some table where username now becomes colon colon. So currently it says the username is empty or 1 equals to 1. Now this dash dash is a syntax for comment in MySQL. So when you provide dash dash, now this whole thing will become comment. But right now I'm just showing what exactly gets passed when you provide this as input. Now this is how the server gets understands this request. Now the server thinks the request is select everything from some table where the username is nothing or 1 equals to 1. And this will make everything from that point onwards as comment. So this whole thing will be as comment. Now since this is always true, so 1 equal to 1 is always true, either being if it is either assignment or checking for equality, it will always be true, right? So since this is always true, it will not even check for username, right? And you will get all the listing of username, and from this table you'll get all the listings. So you're basically trying to manipulate the system. Okay. Yes. Okay. So now what we currently did was we just fooled the system into thinking we are the person with actual password, username and password. Now there are other things that you can do also. Say you want to insert into the table, what you can do is you can provide, as you can see in this technique, this a first of a, or what do you call it? Yeah, I think it is a first of a. So this first of a make this apostrophe comes in here, which makes the username as null. Okay. Similarly, if you use this apostrophe here, it will once again make the username null. So you insert a query saying apostrophe and colon. Now until here, this is one SQL statement. So select star from table where username is null. So there won't be any. Okay. And this becomes another query by itself. Now what you're trying to do is you're trying to insert into table the table user as in into the table with column user and password with values Alice and test. Now what you're doing here is you're injecting your own values into the table instead of just retrieving the values from the table. Okay. And this whole part is considered as comment since you have this. Now there are two ways of identifying SQL injections. Say you have, there are two ways, basically negative and positive approach. Now the negative approach is, can you use some special characters in the query, as in the search fields or the inputs, that might throw you an error. So if you know, as in, it shouldn't throw you an error, the system should actually crash. By crash, I mean, it should not be able to proceed further with your request. But if you get an error saying the username and password does not match, that is not a negative approach. We'll say it while we do the hands-on. Then the positive approach is you're like you're trying to provide input to the function or the system that actually evaluates the value. As in, say, if you provide 17 plus 5 instead of just 22, and what the system actually searches is now 22, then you understand that it actually evaluated this string, and that is why it became 22. And from there, you can understand that it is vulnerable to SQL injection. Okay. Okay, and now we'll do the hands-on after we discuss how to prevent SQL injection and what are the solutions to it. Now there are a few basic solutions for SQL injection. So the developers must never allow client-side data to modify SQL commands. So what they can do is isolate application from SQL. The next thing that they can do is every input that the user provides should be sanitized. Okay. And there is something else called preparing a statement for SQL injection. We'll see what that is in the prevention system. Okay. So in SQL injection prevention, what you do is you're preparing a statement and you're just inserting the value at the end, as in at the position where you want to be as data, but not as code. Okay. What you'll see here is, so you're creating a variable called statement, and you're telling, this is a new variable that you're creating, and this $db is a variable that you would have already assigned to a connection to your database. Okay. Now, this query prepares the statement. So it prepares. Now, what you want to prepare is you provide it as the input to the prepare function. So select star from users where username is this, password is this. Now, as you can see, select star from users is in single quotes. That means it is the table name, as in these are the variables that it knows that these are not just they call command, it is a variable. So select star from this table where variable name is this. Now as you can see here, now the statement is binding the parameter $name to this $name. So what happens is anything that is there in here is assumed as data. So even if you provide this, thing 1 equals to 1 technique into here, now what happens is instead of command directly concatenating with the SQL query, it actually becomes as data. So within the strings. Okay. So even the password is binded with the password parameter. And this is one way of preventing SQL injection. Okay. So any doubt until now? Any doubt before we proceed with hands-on? Guys, if we have any doubt, you can ask. Uh, Today might be a long class. I'm not sure if I have to continue. We'll see if I can continue the browser development tools today or tomorrow. I think dash also works. I didn't get you, Dushan. Okay, what does sanitizing input means? Okay, sanitizing input means you're trying to, so there are, if you're expecting text from an input, you have to check if the input that the user has passed is text or not. That is sanitizing. Okay. The user might input anything. He might input a number, he might input a character, but you should check if it is a character or not, character based string or not. So that is sanitizing the input. You're basically checking for all the requirements that you're actually trying to implement in the system. Okay, so no more doubts. Should we proceed to hands-on? Okay, we'll proceed to hands-on. So I've already provided with you the links in Slack. So just me get to the Slack one. I'll just get to the Slack one, then I'll let you know which one it is. Uh, okay, so the first link that you find is Hacksplaining Lessons. So if you go to Hacksplaining Lessons, okay, so this is what, is it visible? Okay. Okay, if you go to Hacksplaining Lessons, the link that I've provided you, the first link, you'll see there are multiple things that you can learn about in a little bit of practical sense. Okay. So now let's just start with SQL injection. Okay. So let's just start with SQL injection. So this might be a little bit too intro, but this is how I would recommend you to get started. Now, if you guys have any doubts in between, do let me know. Okay, now say you are currently in a banking application. Okay. Now you want to know if this banking application is vulnerable to, what do you call, SQL injection or not. Okay, so this is just trying to set up the context for you. So this is an, okay, where is my pointer? I guess I'm not able to have a pointer here, right? Oops. Okay, so I'll just tell where the application that you see is the application, the section below it is logs, where you can see what might have been the things that are displayed behind, as in the backend. And then, okay, so it is asking us to try with these two. Or you can try as well as, like, you can try along with this session itself. It is pretty easy to do. So say you are trying this time email.com with password as password. Now, if you generally keep, okay, what did I miss? Okay, so I was basically trying to guess the user ID, user email, and password, and it didn't let me in, saying unknown email or password is what they rendered me invalid. Now you can see here below that there is logs that are printed saying no such user, report this to the user, invalid credentials. Okay, so this is not a negative approach. This is basically invalidating you. Now the negative approach would be trying to provide password, and say you provide a cost of it with it. Now if you try to run it, what might happen or might not is entirely dependent on the implementation of the system. Now, as you can see, there was an error that expected. Okay. Now, if you can see this thing, it says that unterminated quoted string at or near something. So, what my apostrophe in the password made, so what this character actually made is somehow interacted with the SQL query, and it made changes to the SQL query, which made it unreadable. And that is why we were provided with a error. Okay. Now, this means that we have tried a negative approach. Now we know that this system is vulnerable to SQL injections. Okay. Okay. And now this is what they are telling us. So this is the actual SQL query, what they have in the backend. Now, when we try to provide password, as you can see, it is basically just password, right? But if we try to provide a password and apostrophe, that you'll be able to see the difference with limit 1. The color of it changes, right? It means that the whole thing now has become a string. Okay? And that is why it thinks that the password variable is not terminated, and hence the string is not executable. Now, what if we try to provide one more column? Now you can see that, not colon, apostrophe. So now you can see that once again we have made it correct. So this shouldn't provide us an error. Okay. Now the thing is, okay, let's see what it does. Okay. Okay, that we have looked into. Okay, now we'll try with our, what do you call it? 1 equals to 1 technique. So our 1 equals to 1 technique is, as you can see here, an apostrophe space or space 1 equals to 1 dash dash. So if you type in this means, now just look at the SQL code that has been formed right now. So it is select star from users, where email is this and password is this or this. Now, if the email user ID, the person with this user, oh, sorry, if the person with an email ID of user@email.com is present, we'll be able to access this because in the AND part, the password is null or 1 equals to 1. Since 1 equals to 1, the right hand part of this AND is also true, right? Now we should be able to get it in. As you can see, now we were able to get in. So this is a basic SQL injection. Okay, so we'll do one more SQL injection. Okay, so that we get to know exactly what it is. Okay, so I've also sent you another link, which is the Red Tiger Labs. So the Red Tiger Labs, you can go to the first link, the level 1, and you will be able to see this page, right? Okay, so guys, did you understand the first part of the hands-on? Okay, I guess you guys are still doing the thing. Okay, now you can see that this is another, say, example for SQL injection. I would say this is not actually, okay, you will be able to see it. So it says there are some things. It says get the login for user X. And the hint is you really need one, OMG. The table name that they have provided by themselves is level1 underscore users. Okay. They have provided category 1. It says this category does not exist. Something. Now, as you can see, there is a link here, right? As you can see, this one is a link, an anchor tag. So if I click it, okay, so we get something. It says this hack, it is cool. My cats are sweet. Meow. Now, if you see the URL of this before proceeding with this anchor tag was just till PHP. Now, if I click it, there is a get request that is passed as cat equals to 1, right? So when you click it, it becomes cat equals to 1. Now let us try with cat equals to 2 to see if it provides any changes or not. It still said this category does not exist. Okay, now cat equals to 3. Now cat equals to 4. So we are not able to find another cat that actually makes it, what do you call it, visible. So what we can try is, we can try to know, since I know this part, I will be able to code it. Okay, so we can, there is a SQL tag, SQL query, which is used as order by. So we can order by the amount of column that we have, need or have. So say we can order it by 2. Okay, for 2 it still works. Order it by 3, it still works. Order it by 4, it still works. Order it by 5. Okay. So since it provides, what do you call, an error, not an error, since we are not able to see, okay, I'll explain this better. As you can see, cat is 1. If cat is 1, we should be able to, what do you call, we should be able to see the value. Okay, I'll just do this. If cat is 1, we should be able to see this, right? Now we'll see if cat is 1 and 1 equals to 1. Okay, we are still able to see it because what I have typed is, I'll just type it here in tab. What I've typed is, becomes cat equals to 1 and 1 equals to 1. Now since 1 equals to 1 is true, it will display me this, right? So what if we try, say, cat equals to 1 and 1 equals to 2. Now 1 equals to 2 is false, right? And that is why we shouldn't be able to get this back. We'll try it. So we are not getting this back. It means that category should be 1 for us to be able to get the output. So we'll just leave it there. Okay. Now, how many columns are there to find that? We do order by 1. So by this we mean, if there is 1 in the as column name, sorry, 1 column and 1 as the category, we are getting it. So what order by what you will be able to find is the number of columns present in that table. Okay. Now say you're doing by 3. So you keep increasing to check the limit of columns. So you do it by 4 and then you do it by 5. So when you do it by 5, you do not get that message. That means there are just 4 columns in that thing. Okay. Now what we can do is, there is another, okay, so this might be a little out of the scope, but I just wanted to show that there are ways you can actually manipulate things. Now say you can, there is something called as union in SQL, which actually joins as in 2 tables. Now if you say union select 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what this does is, for this cat one, you'll get the message that we generally see here. Union, what it does is, along with the table that we have, it unions joins 1, 2, 3, 4 as the entry. Okay. So now you can see that you are just able to see 3 and 4, right? So that means The values that are displayed here are from column 3 and column 4, and column 1 and 2 are not being displayed in our web page. Okay, so there are multiple ways to go about this. Instead of 3, what we can do is we can get the version of the database. Now, as you can see, this is the version of Debian. I guess it is Debian. Then now, if you want to see the database, so the database is Hackett database. Okay. Now, what we can try to do is, since we know that the table name is level1_users, okay, what we can do is instead of 3 and 4, we can try to provide, say, username, comma, password from table from level1_users. You can see what I did was I just guessed that the column name would be username, the password would be the column name for the password would be password, and they have provided us with the table. That is what I used. So that was easy. Is the answer. Right? So this is how we proceed. Okay. So provide it here, and that was easy. Okay, so we just passed on to our next thing. Okay, so this is how you basically try to go beyond with SQL injections. Okay, so let's close this thing. So any doubts until now? See, if you guys have doubts with the red tiger that I did, we can discuss it on Slack. But if you guys have any doubts with the explaining the banking system that we did, that we can discuss it here. Guys, any doubt? I guess no. I guess we'll better proceed with. Okay, we'll do the browser development tools tomorrow, along with application development, or we can do it on day 7, as the time is too less today. Okay. Okay, we'll just go through cross-site scripting. So cross-site scripting is an injection attack where it is similar to the SQL injection, but here it is based for JavaScript. Now, providing. Okay, we'll do it on day 7 or something. Now, providing command as input in place. Okay, where is my pointer? In place where JavaScript is expecting data, it can lead JavaScript to make unintended changes. Now, say JavaScript asks you what is your name, and instead of providing data, what you provide is you try to provide a script which asks the session ID of Alice. Okay. So this is a type of injection attack also. Now there are 3 types of injection attacks. So one is three types of cross-site scripting attacks. Reflected accesses, stored accesses, and client-side DOM accesses. Now, as you can see, the cross-site scripting is basically, if you try to abbreviate it, it becomes CSS, right? But there is already a CSS, and hence they made it. Is what I feel is what they made it as XSS. So in cross there is XI. That is why they made it as XSS. So reflected attack is what, like when the server, you store something on the server, and when they're trying to access, you're not exactly storing it on the server. You try to access something from the server, and if there is an error or something that you have it as an event listener, that might reflect back to you as and excesses. Okay, we'll look into it. The next is stored excesses. So what you do is you store the attack code on the server itself, and any person who visits that will get the excesses. Okay. Now the last one is client-side DOM excesses. Now these are the ones which try to take advantages of the vulnerable functions such as eval, post message, okay, all this stuff. Now we'll see what reflected accesses is. Now say this is a PHP code, this blue from this to this is a PHP code, and you're setting the name variable from the URL as in the URL has name as an input which has a value to it. We are assigning that value to the $name variable. Now what this body will do is it will say hello given the name. Now we'll see an example on how a normal user might behave. So what a normal user might behave is if they give this as the URL with name as Alice, it will print hello Alice. Now you can see that whatever you are given here is printed here because this direct name is directly appended here, right? Now, how does how does an attacker might think to take advantage of this? Now, since this $name is not sanitized or it isn't even changed, so as the user provide the same way it is provided in the document, as in the HTML. So this is where the user might provide something like this. So instead of data, he provides a command saying script alert excesses. So now this becomes an XSS vulnerable. Now, this will actually provide an alert window with XSS as the content. So this is one type of reflected XSS. So there are various ways to go about it. Instead of just alert XSS, you can try to alert the cookie of that page. Okay. If they are trying to block, say they are trying to block script as in general string, what you can try is an URL encoded method. Okay, so this %3c is an URL conversion for the open symbol. Okay. So this open symbol is same as the %3c, and now even here, as you can see, you encoded most of the thing with % symbol to fool the system. So this is one type of technique that you can use. The other type of techniques are event handlers. Say when the body, so on load is when the tag loads, this is what you have to perform. So when a body loads, you alert XSS. So this is also vulnerable. So all these are types of vulnerabilities. Now, this is one of my favorite vulnerabilities. So what you do is instead of actually trying to provide a script tag, you try to provide an image tag. You try to provide an image tag with a source which really does not exist, as in you can just give gibberish here. Okay. So if you just give this, it will actually provide you an error, right? Now what you can say is on error, you do this function. Okay. Now there are other techniques also. So we'll not go into much into this. Next, we'll go into client-side accesses. Now, client-side accesses is you're trying to modify the document itself. So what you do is this example takes. Okay, we'll see it with the example. Okay. So if the thing is example.com/test.html/./hash_alice, what the script does is it takes location.hash, right? So from hash, everything is stored in name. And then this document writes hello plus this whole as name. Now what this will turn is into this hello hash Alice. Now what an attacker might do is he might provide instead of name an script which says alert XSS. The space is by mistake. I didn't intend to keep the space by the way. And this is what will get printed. Okay. So there are various solutions for XSS, which is you should never trust, you should never blindly trust the data that is inputted from the user. And before using it somewhere else, you should always escape the data. Escaping data is, say, in general coding, you have escape characters, right? Say /n. So if you want to provide a slash, you have a slash before slash. Okay. Say you are coding it in C. So if you want to provide slash as the input itself in the string, so to give slash, you have to provide slash of slash, or else it becomes as an escape character. So that is how you have to escape the data that the user provides. Okay. Now, before we'll do the browser development tools on day 7 or something like that. So we'll directly go on to hands-on today for the XSS. Okay. Okay. So we'll go into. So I've also provided the link for XSS. The first one is XSS game app. So if you can go to XSS game app, yeah, this is the one, right? Okay, yeah. So this says hello world of XSL. So I'll just go through what the main part of this is. So the mission objective is inject a script to pop up a JavaScript alert in the frame below. Okay. So this is a search. Say I do some search. As you can see that this is a GET request. So I can actually do much worse with this. Now let's say we are just trying to achieve the objective here. So our objective here is to pop up a JavaScript alert. So this is very pretty basic. So what you can do is you can use script, and within the script tag you have to have alert, and in alert you can have anything or you can just leave it blank. Okay. And you search for it and you get an alert tag. Okay. Now you're past the first round. Now let's say you are going to the second round. Okay. Okay. So this is a type of stored XSS. Now as you can see, every time I press OK, okay, now it has somehow gone. Right. Okay. Now I'll tell how to solve this. Now the thing is inject a script to pop up an alert once again. Now you are provided with something similar like to a forum where you can comment stuff. Now this is the place where I'll use the image technique. So what I'll do is I'll insert, okay, let's try to just do script alert. Let's try to close the script back. Let's see if this works or not. Okay, this still works. Okay, please. Okay. Now, there are ways that you can try something interesting, like to open an image tag. Say you provide source as some gibberish. Okay, so this will not actually work. Now, that is why you provide on error. And you on error say alert and you close it. So you can see this image was not being able to load it. That is why you get into on error, and that is how you get this. So there are multiple. If possible, you can. Okay. So this is very. So we'll directly go on to level 3. Or we might not be able to go to level 3. Okay, let's just close this one. So stored XSS is really irritating. So never get scared. As in, okay, so there are multiple links that I've sent for XSS as well. So one is prompt to win, the other is alert to win, the one is XSS challenge that I've provided all the links in the Slack, and you can really try it there. Okay. If you guys have any doubt with this, do not look into solutions on Google. Try to come up with your own script. If you have doubts, ask me. I'll try to give you hints. Instead of just directly looking into solutions, it would be better if you go through the hints. And tomorrow we'll be doing browser development tools and how it is really important. Not tomorrow, if possible on day 7. So I'll keep this on the next slides also. Okay, so tomorrow we'll be doing buffer overflow. So tomorrow we'll be doing buffer overflow, which is an application security thing. So if possible, could you guys just read a little bit about buffer overflow and what do you call it? The assembly language coding? Okay. So we'll try to understand a little bit of code. I'll also post a poll on Slack whether to do buffer overflow tomorrow or we'll go with basics of Linux environment and stuff like that. Okay. Yeah. If you guys have any doubt, you can ask. Any guys doubt? Okay, I'll be here like for 5 more minutes or so, 5 or 10 more minutes. If you guys do have doubt, do ask me. Okay, I guess there are no doubts. If you guys do not have any doubt. Okay, so I'm wrapping up today's class. So if you guys want to leave, you can leave. And for the guys who want to ask questions to us. So I guess there are no doubts today, right? Okay. Yes, and please do solve the RSA question. It is really interesting if you can. Okay. Thank you guys. I guess I'll end the broadcast now. Yeah. Have a great night, guys.